The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time offered a lot when it came to the searchability of its world. In some ways, it picked up where A Link to the Past left off. Obviously, both games shared an ability to traverse two different worlds, although in Ocarina of Time's case, the accessibility of transporting yourself to and fro was a much longer process than its Super Nintendo predecessor. But these mechanics always brought out the most in exploration. You discover a neat area, check out what it had to offer, and then would try to return to that place in the opposite world. For me though, it was Ocarina of Time that I spent the most time doing this in. A Link to the Past was a game we only rented, but upon completion of Ocarina of Time, I obviously spent a lot of time still exploring. As a child, my searches often stopped when I come across an impassable barrier. But with the tools of today, I've been able to pick up that sense of exploration again, except with complete control over my environment. And that's where we find ourselves today in this video. I want to focus on that concept. Two worlds divided by time, with one single portal uniting them. A sword set within stone bridging the gap. Because despite having to travel back and forth to the Temple of Time to visit the past or the future, there exists time rifts between worlds that were left in the game. Portals in the past and future, that upon entering would warp Link to the opposite time, but still as a child or an adult. Today we're talking about the invisible time warps in The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. So, as always, first let's set the stage. Because besides these warps, there's a lot of other neat things to cover alongside it. First and foremost, one of the biggest burdens to me as a child were areas within the game that existed only in one of the two time periods. Most notably to me was Hyrule Castle Town, as everything was stripped from the area in the future. All the buildings, the back alley, etc. When you play as adult Link, there was essentially nothing that you could do to access these places. And of course, that drove me nuts. I thought if I could just hop over the small barriers, I could enter places that I knew existed from my time spent as child Link. Now obviously, this isn't the case. If we peel back the layers to get rid of the graphics in the area, we can see that behind the scenes geometry does exist. The entrances to the shops are still there, and there's even geometry that appears in front of Link despite him never being able to get back there. However, all the loading zones are cleared from the map. Even utilizing a moon jump code years later yielded that nothing can be found. If we use hacks to warp to these areas as adult Link, we can certainly explore them in their undestroyed state. The sky is blue, and the town is lively. But upon stepping through the loading zone, we are cast back into the future, with no way to return to where we just came from. This of course makes sense, as the loading area is a one-way trip, especially on maps that were designed for only child Link or adult Link. If the map was designed not to be accessible in both time periods, it won't change. This can lead to some pretty funny cutscenes if loaded intentionally, but one-way tickets aren't super interesting. Unless the player somehow wrong warps or teleports to these areas by manipulating the game's memory through certain actions, there's really no way to reach these regions otherwise. A lot of you watching who are familiar with Ocarina of Time speedrunning will probably note that utilizing Forore's Wind on B, which is a glitch that places this particular item on your B button without restrictions, would allow you to go anywhere at any time. And you definitely wouldn't be wrong. Since you can set Forore's Wind anywhere with this glitch, that means you can recall anywhere too. This can be used to trigger those funny cutscenes I mentioned earlier, like adult Link meeting child Zelda for the first time, or child Link facing off against Bongo Bongo in Kakariko Village. But all these things require complex setups that a kid wouldn't know how to do. Or at least it was certainly out of scope for me as a kid. But this is where we get back to that original concept, because we've covered all the complex ways of traversing through the game. But now we can talk about the areas that developers left behind, thinking that no one would ever figure out a way to access them. Essentially, the loading zones that link the past and future together that are hiding in plain sight. The first time I ever heard about this was when someone had figured out a way to enter Jabu-Jabu's belly as adult Link. Normally, Jabu-Jabu's mouth is wide open, and you can wander right in as child Link. But the thing is, instead of clearing out the loading zone when you're here as an adult, they simply buried it within the ice. If you glitch out of bounds around this icy block, Link will trigger the warp and you'll end up in Jabu-Jabu's belly as an adult. In Ocarina of Time 3D, doing this is even easier, as you literally just have to walk around the exact edge of the ice for the warp to take place. Honestly, I'm surprised this wasn't fixed when they redid the game, as I'm sure while updating the models within the game, someone should have seen that the loading zone was peeking out of one side of the ice. This is more difficult to do in the original game, but the next one we'll be covering is actually surprisingly right on the open. So let's swing on over to Gerudo Valley and take a look. If the Iron Gate within Gerudo Valley wasn't the bane of your existence as a kid, I don't think we played the same game. It was the one outdoors part of the world that was off limits to Link as a child. So of course, everyone tried to make it over this thing. I never did myself, but I did explore this area pretty thoroughly with Action Replay when I got the Master Quest version on the GameCube. However, it appears that as a kid, I wasn't too far off, as you can get over the gate with a Kuko jump combined with a mid-air slash attack with your sword. So what's exactly over in this banished land? Well, for one, if you head back into the fortress, there's a piece of heart that you're never actually supposed to get. So even though there are 36 pieces of heart labeled to be obtainable in the game, 37 are actually present. We're free to wander around the seemingly abandoned area and explore it to our heart's content. But the thing is, we actually missed something pretty neat on our way in. If we head back to the entrance to the valley, there's actually an invisible portal just beyond the bridge on the right hand side. As long as we don't get spotted by a guard, we can navigate to this place and warp straight to the future, inside the invisible carpenter's tent. Departing from the tent takes us back to the past, but we're free to go back to this future-only area as often as we please. If we happen to save the carpenters from the thieves' hideout, they'll actually be waiting for us in here even as Child Link. Apparently the developers just deleted the entire tent, but forgot to delete the loading zone. Perhaps they figured no player will be able to make it over that blasted Iron Gate. Now, to my knowledge, these are the only two instances in the game where these things exist, as in Jabu-Jabu's warp and the invisible tent. Areas that are simply off limits but still accessible like the Shadow Temple or other dungeons aren't really necessarily in the same category as this for me, as the objects these warps were tied to were deleted, but their effect still remained. However, there could be even more examples of these out there, so if one comes to mind, I'd love to read about it in the comments below. Warps between the past and future that exists outside of the Temple of Time. Oh, I do want to say if you haven't watched my video on Bongo Bongo taking over the Deku Tree, I highly recommend doing so. I basically transformed the whole dungeon to reflect this change in the storyline, and it'd absolutely be a nightmare for Child Link. Redeads, Dead Hand, and a double boss fight await our hero. You can find a link to the video in the description below and at the end of this video. And with that, thanks for watching, guys and gals, and until my next video, cheers.